Welcome everyone to tonight's session from a very chilly Yass in southern New South Wales. We've actually got some snow on the ground here this evening, and yes, I was remiss that obviously Tasmanian people probably aren't that excited by the state of origin. So I've just flown home from Brisbane where the airport was full of Queensland Maroon supporters, so it's nice to escape some of that. But welcome and thanks so much for joining us. And as Dee said, what we're going to go through tonight is a bit of a deep dive into LPA record keeping in particular, so what that means on farm for you. And how you can be prepared on the instance that you might actually be called up for an audit. But the agenda there on the screen, we're just going to talk very briefly about the role of Integrity Systems Company, then touch on the importance of the red meat integrity system itself and what it actually is, and the two core programs that make up that system, which are Livestock Production Assurance and the NLIS. And then we'll talk about LPA accreditation and auditing, and absolutely give you plenty of record keeping tips for tonight, and actually how you can upload some of those documents directly to your LPA account, which is a relatively new feature at the moment. So just to start with, a little bit about where Integrity Systems Company fits and what our role is. So Integrity Systems Company is a subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, which is a service provider to the industry. And if you look there on the slide, MLA and ISC both provide those industry services. And the organisations in the top row there, they're focused on policy and strategy. So they advocate on behalf of producers to decision makers, and they're often referred to as the peak industry councils, and they either represent a particular sector of the industry, whether it's the meat processing sector, live export, or the different species in the red meat industry. So all those organisations on that diagram there have very different roles, but all these organisations work very closely together to support the red meat industry. So a little bit about Meat and Livestock Australia. MLA is responsible for research, development and adoption and marketing activities on behalf of the red meat industry. We do that by collaborating with the Australian government and the wider red meat industry. And the way that we do that is that we invest those producer levies, which are paid on transaction of livestock, so sheep, cattle and goats. Those levy funds are then matched by Australian government funds as well. And MLA, under the guidance of those industry representative bodies, invest those levies in initiatives in either R&D and marketing that contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness for the industry. So Integrity Systems Company, on the other hand, we manage and deliver Australia's red meat integrity system. Now, this system underpins consumer confidence in the production of Australian red meat and covers an on-farm assurance element, which is the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, and identification and traceability, and that's through the National Livestock Identification System. Now, ISC works collaboratively with government and industry to deliver these world-leading traceability and assurance programs, and these are the foundations of Australia's red meat integrity system. So the red meat integrity system, it's really important. It ensures that Australian red meat is safe to eat and fully traceable. It provides on-farm assurance, animal identification and traceability from paddock to plate, and it underpins the livestock selling system, giving confidence to buyers, retailers and consumers. And that diagram there on the right-hand side just basically talks to the on-farm assurance element, which is LPA, and the identification and traceability element, which is NLIS, and how those two programs work together and make up the integrity system. So just to put all of this into context as to why it's so important, the Australian red meat industry now, it's a $28 billion industry. It employs 400,000 people across 80,000 businesses and delivers product to 100 markets all around the world. So it's a pretty large and important industry for the Australian economy these days, and thousands of people depend on our industry for their livelihoods and for their food security and protein requirements, and that's both here in Australia and also all around the world. Now, the confidence that consumers have in our product globally is based on traceability through the supply chain. That provides accountability right back to the farm where animals are raised, and also production to an assessed standard. So as a first world country, we often take it for granted that our food is produced safely and ethically. Now, this is certainly not the case in every country around the world, and when when we sell most of our food to international markets, and certainly most of the red meat we produce does go overseas, it's really important that we have transparent and rigorous production systems that require auditing and record keeping on farm. Our international buyers require that these systems are in place. And on the slide there's a couple of examples where overseas there's been significant issues such as mad cow disease or foot and mouth disease, African swine fever. And it's these sorts of risks to our farms and our consumers that we absolutely want to avoid. And it's these types of incursions and issues that the industry might face that highlight why our red meat integrity system is just so important. It protects our prosperity, our market access, and our market advantage, and that's linked to our reputation, which has been earned over a very long period of time for providing safe and high quality food. It supports premium prices and positive overseas perceptions of our product, which we certainly enjoy, and it ensures that Australia's reputation as a clean and green supplier of food around the world. Now, there certainly are multiple producers and many properties that make up not only the Tasmanian, but also the Australian red meat industry. But it's the integrity system is really about delivering one measure of quality on behalf of the whole Australian industry. So with that, we all have a role to play to ensure that we stand by what we sell. Now, I realise we've got varying levels of experience on the webinar this evening, so just as a really quick refresher, we'll provide a little bit more detail on the two programs which work together to underpin our industry's food safety and traceability on farm. So the Livestock Production Assurance Program, or LPA, that's all about on-farm assurance, covering on-farm management of food safety, animal welfare, and biosecurity risks. It's the tick of assurance for your product from producer through to consumer, and it demonstrates the professionalism of the industry and underpins market access for Australian red meat. The NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System, it's all about identification and traceability. It tracks the location of every animal throughout its life. Now, the NLIS is mandatory for producers and it's endorsed by major producer, feedlot, agent, sale yard and processor bodies. And it's underpinned by state and territory legislation and enhances Australia's ability to track livestock during disease and food safety incidents such as residue incursions and the like. So there's a couple of other central elements to the program or to the integrity system which are really important. The first of those is the Property Identification Code, or the PIC. Now, a PIC is required for registration with both LPA and NLIS. PICs are managed independently by the state and territory departments of agriculture. So we have DPIPWI here on the line. They manage the allocation of PICs in Tasmania. And the incorporation of the PIC into both LPA and NLIS is the only way that traceability and food safety can truly be managed at a national level. And the other two elements of the system that are really important is record keeping for both LPA and NLIS, and then also the National Vendor Declaration. And that's how the link between on-farm assurance and traceability is made. So LPA, the majority of Australian meat processors require that livestock is sourced from LPA accredited producers. So this means that if you are LPA accredited, you'll have more options when it comes to selling your livestock. And with more options comes more competition, which of course could mean a higher price. So LPA accredited producers commit to carrying out on-farm practices or managing their livestock and their property that support the integrity of the entire system. And this is verified when producers sign their national vendor decks for any livestock movements. Now, there are 7 LPA requirements, and they are the property risk assessment, safe and responsible animal treatments, stock fodder, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatments, preparation for dispatch of livestock transactions and movements, biosecurity and animal welfare. And we'll come back to this and we'll talk to it in more detail over the course of the webinar. So NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System, it reflects Australia's commitment to biosecurity and food safety, and it provides a competitive advantage in a global market. NLIS is required to facilitate the traceability of animals in accordance with the National Traceability and Performance Standards. Now, NLIS combines 3 elements that enable the lifetime traceability of animals. The first is that all livestock are identified by an NLIS accredited visual or electronic ear tag or device. The second is that all physical locations are identified by means of a property identification code or a PIC. And then the third element of NLIS is that all livestock location data and movements are recorded in a central database. And that database is known as the NLIS database. Now, when animals are transferred between PICs or between locations, that's when LPA and NLIS come together, and that's through the LPA National Vendor Declaration. So the NVD brings together all the on-farm assurance, identification and traceability details of a particular animal or consignment of animals. Now, these form the basis for ensuring a safe and traceable food product. The NVD captures food safety information on every animal every time it moves from property to processors or to sale yards. And NVDs importantly provide evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices when transferring livestock along the value chain. Now, you can stand by what you sell by ensuring that every NVD you complete is clear, complete and correct, or alternatively, you can use the ENVD for a faster, easier way to manage your consignments. And